Welcome to the Cloud Technology Sessions Summit today. I'm Kevin, your host. Today we're going to do something special. We're going to recap the incredible announcements that we had from Google Next 24 that we just attended. We've got the perfect guests to help us unpack all of that we learned and all of the announcements that were brought to everyone's attention in that session. Jeff, our resident Google architect, and Josh, our AI wizard. Guys, you ready to dive in?
Yeah, for sure, Kevin. Next is always a highlight for Google, so it was a pleasure to be there, and it definitely didn't disappoint.
It it was pretty crazy, wasn't it, Jeff? I mean, a lot of announcements, a lot of fascinating people to talk to, a lot of engaging architects, and just the excitement was palpable. That's for sure.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And I logged about 30 miles, so that was great too.
it's great.
I was really excited also about all the exciting AI announcements. So there's a lot there. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about that today.
That's great. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started, Josh? And what are the biggest announcements or updates that you found interesting as you paid attention to those?
Oh man, just kind of top of mind, there is a few really exciting ones. There was a great demo of, some of, how to build an AI agent for your website or some of the code assistance or just some of the AI building. So there's definitely some really cool ones, and hopefully we'll in later sessions be able to dive more into them. But those are the ones that are top of mind for me.
Well, Josh, it's really fascinating because we heard a lot about Gemini Code Assist during the week. And can you tell us a little bit of what that has to do with helping you code and talk a little bit about what that announcement gave you?
And typically when you're going through and you're building things as a builder, you're looking at, having to look at, Stack Overflow and find things through search. And you don't have to do that any longer. So that was really exciting to see just kind of that integration into the coding, your IDE, your coding environment, or looking at, like multi-line completing of code or being able to prompt things like instead of having to go out to ChatGPT and put in a prompt and then bring it back, you can go through and just do that right in line in your code editor. Or just looking at, even smart actions and pulling in, some of those things that you want to like create a unit test or create something like a block of comment. And so there's some really cool things that you can do that will help to expedite some of your coding process.
It's awesome. Jeff, what was stand out to you as you listened to the Code Assist and the things that Josh just brought up to us?
Yeah, there's so much that happens when you're coding, and we all have bad habits, and we also have creative workarounds that come back to bite us later. I've had a few customers where they've leveraged what you could call a bug within their code to get something done, and then when that bug gets patched, suddenly their code doesn't work anymore. And so some of those things can be avoided with Code Assist, which I think is really fantastic because you're able to prevent those future headaches from even happening.
I also liked on Code Assist too. I don't know if you saw this, Jeff, but inside of some of the sessions, you can kind of tailor some of your code to have guardrails so that way you're not having like loss of intelligence around, some of your code, but also you can put some of those guardrails in where you're like saying like, hey, you know what? I really want to see some of this code style come through in our Code Assist. And so I liked some of those kind of like either soft or hard guardrails that they introduced in some of their announcements.
Yeah, those are really nice because what they do is they ensure that your coding standards are consistent across the board, and you're not really going to be looking at a mishmash of different styles as you read through code. So it makes it reading easier and easier to update too down the road when you need to, because you don't have to keep changing context on what you're thinking is happening.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, Jeff, as an architect, bugs are one thing, but are you thinking about broader code patterns as part of this?
Yeah, there are broader code patterns here. I mean, and it's some of this also speeds up, right? If you're talking about deploying infrastructure into Google and you're writing Terraform, being able to quickly get to, let's just say it's a VM that you need to spin up with a certain config, Code Assist can help you with that. So it's able to quickly get you going as far as like different coding styles, or if you're using a Python CDK or something like that, Code Assist will be able to jump in and accelerate your development time so that you can get to deploying faster and work on your applications.
Awesome.
One of the things I also liked that was this is kind of like a smaller nuance announcement. but being able to interpret some of your code. And so you can ask questions of the code assist and it will interpret some of that code and tell you about it. So it's a great way of kind of understanding your code base or even just one page of code. So kind of a cool follow along with what Jeff had brought up.
So it's not just about fixing typos anymore. It's upping the game all across
Yeah.
the spectrum.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty powerful. Jeff, what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's definitely really powerful because what it does, it allows, when you hire a resource, it allows you to get them up to speed faster, right? It's not just looking at your code and saying, hey, you've got a bug here, running just a basic debugger in there, but it's really like getting people up to speed faster. So if you have like a junior developer or something like that, you can have them be productive much more quickly because they'll be learning best practices as they work in real time.
What's fascinating about that, and I'm having to deal with this now, where youth are coming out of school, out of college. They want to get their first gig. They want to be involved in some interesting projects. Using tools like this help them ramp faster into a company so that they can get more experience and be more effective sooner. And that's a win-win, I think, for both the employer who's kind of putting themselves out there and the student who's coming in looking for their next career. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think it's pretty impressive too. It's also helpful because a lot of developers, they work interesting hours.
Mm.
So it's one of those things where at 2 a.m. you have this great idea, but you're not entirely sure how to implement it. You now have, effectively and somebody that you can talk to who you can bounce that idea off of and potentially, come to a conclusion on what you're working on instead of laying in bed thinking about it for the next 6 hours.
This is a kind of a sea change, I think, in the industry. I mean, I think we've all been around long enough to see things move and change and gradually morph, but this is exciting. This is something that moves the needle in a meaningful way, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So, Josh, from a dev standpoint, how are you feeling about the pain that you have to go through on the infra side and going through your projects and what are all those things that you have to deal with that you think that this might address?
I think kind of what you're talking about is the Gemini Cloud Assist. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really excited about that announcement because, there's always like emerging changes as far as, infrastructure or new patterns and practices emerging. And what I was really excited about that is that, like it could be something simple like, building out a cloud function or how to like change or, create a trigger off of cloud storage. There's always different patterns and practices to be able to do that from a developer's perspective or a builder's perspective. And with Cloud Assist, I was really excited because I'm assuming that some of this, I don't know that I saw any announcements around it as far as like how frequently it will be updated, but I'm really excited about being able to, as you're building, being able to ask questions about, what reference architecture I should be using. And so being able to just ask a question and it be able to deliver on not just like a single line of code, but like a reference architecture for patterns and practices for like a mobile application and how best to roll that out. And so I was really excited about that announcement and just how some of that reference architecture will, or knowledge base, instead of having to dig through Google searches or Google Docs, being able to just pull that knowledge out of the agent and be able to use that reference architecture, which helps to expedite the development process. So I was really excited about that, the Cloud Assist.
Yeah, and I
This
think
is
that it also sort of democratizes cloud because what it allows you to do is have developers who may not know exactly what infrastructure they need to run an application, and they can in plain language ask Cloud Assist kind of what they're thinking of they want to do and how they want to do it, and they can put together something that can go to architecture as more than just a first pass. It can actually be a little bit more solid, so it can speed up the time of going from concept through prototype to production. So there's a lot of advantage there for developers to step in and sort of help define what the architecture is going to look like for their applications.
Having been an architect my whole life, I mean, there's so much that goes into first learning the platforms, understanding the nuances, getting into all the trainings, and then seeing how it interacts with whatever workload you're throwing at it from a performance standpoint, throughput, all the things that go into the back, the CPU, the storage, everything has to come together. This seems like it's kind of going down that path of kind of taking the complexities out of all that activity that you would normally have to address and learn and spend time building skills in so that you can just get right to the workload. I mean, is that kind of how you saw it, Josh? Or did I overrepresent that?
No, I definitely agree. And Jeff, you probably can appreciate this from an architecture perspective, locking down the different layers, right? I'm assuming that would expedite that area too, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about it, you describe it, you can sort of say, I need to provision this infrastructure, I need it to connect to this other service, or I need it to have this capability, and you can overlay your security context into that conversation. And so it's able then to say, okay, you need these security groups and you need these VMs, and maybe you're trying to connect to a database. So here's the policy you need to be able to make that happen as well.
I agree with, like building out a full mobile application, for instance, there's a lot of layers that you have to
Yeah.
consider, right? And that architecture can sprawl fairly wide. And what I love about the cloud is you can easily spin up those services, but there's a lot of things to consider, right? And of that checklist or reference architecture, you may forget about something. And Kevin, you kind of brought up earlier, some of those developers that are coming out of school, they may not be aware of all those different layers, whether it's the database layer or all the way out into like prompt or, SQL injection, right? And so just kind of locking down all those layers, I'm excited about the possibility of being able to spin some of that up even quicker.
Great. Well, if we can bounce into the next item, which came up, Vertex AI goodies. So a lot was announced there, a huge push. What stood out to you, Josh?
Yeah, two areas that were really exciting to me. One was prompt management or prompt sharing and versioning. The other was just kind of looking at the possibility of quickly building out an agent. So those are two areas that I was really excited about.
Excellent. And what about demystifying the AI development? So Vertex AI has always had my head spinning with all the possibilities that are available to you. What about prompt management? Let's start there.
Yeah, with each model, you're going to have different prompts that you need to worry about, right? And so like, temperature or, just different settings or APIs and so on. And so there's a lot of knowledge that has to go into some of that as far as building out the prompts. And as we're going through, like we can stand on the shoulders of some of what Google's already done as far as on some of the models and be more effective at looking at some of those models and how to leverage them, looking at what they've already built with prompts. But then also looking at within organizations, like maybe there's prompts that we've built that we want to share with each other. And so those are two areas that usually you spend a lot of time in that people underappreciate. And so I was really excited about that announcement.
Well, that's great. So with regards to your day-to-day work effort, how does it change using this capability?
Models are always getting built out new, right? And there's always new versions coming out. Just with this conference, Gemini 1.5 came out, right? And recently, Claude 3 came out with a few different models. And so for me, I'm really excited about, just being more effective as far as like either sharing prompts or how to best leverage those code bases. So for instance, that model we can look at and say, hey, you know what? I want to look at instead of having to build, document intelligence and pull that data out, I can use these models with these prompts and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to pass in this list of JSON and being able to pull all that data out of just using that awesome model. It can take care of me having to hand code a lot of these things. And so through prompts and this prompt engineering, me and other developers within our organization or within other organizations can be a lot more effective at using these awesome models.
That's great. With regards to the next item, GKE preloading, for smoother AI deployments, faster rollouts, things like that. What do you think about this so-called superpowers of GKE's preloading capability? You guys have built some pretty complex systems in the past. How does this matter to you?
This is actually really important when it comes to using models and doing machine learning, because when you're running in containers, the containers aren't necessarily up and running when the application starts or when the user makes a request of the environment. And so that container has to be loaded, then it has to be started. And then depending on how you're doing your loads, you may have to then bring in your models into that container, which can be a lengthy time for customers to be sitting there waiting for an answer. And we have seen some occasions where, there might be 10 to 20 seconds where a question is asked of the model and there's just isn't an answer. And depending on how your application's architected, you could see errors or just user frustration because, wow, this is really taking a long time to get to an answer for. So, when you're able to say, I want this container running and I want it ready to go. So it's effectively there when the customer asks the question, it can go to the container, it can go to the model, it can get the answers it needs and bring that back quickly. That's a massive performance boost for the models, as well as something to improve customer satisfaction or end user satisfaction when they're using your particular tool or product.
Excellent. Well, the next topic is that we want to get into is data. So they announced this enterprise truth, or the panacea of the end of data disputes is how they're kind of thinking about this. When we start talking about enterprise truth, it sounds like a big vision or goal. We've heard of data lakes. We've heard of all this ability to aggregate your data and centralize it. What is the goal of enterprise truth, and where is it taking us?
So it's a pretty broad definition, but it's working to solve something that, as you said, most organizations have experienced. Your data is all over the place. You might have the same data in more than one location, and it might be slightly different, or one may be a little bit more outdated than the other. And so you and I run a report on, let's say it's sales numbers, and your numbers say we did really fantastic, and my numbers say we did okay. Who's right? Whose numbers are correct? How do you know who's correct? And so that's part of what enterprise truth is working to solve. It's about putting the data in one place. It's about verifying it. It's about putting governance on top of that data so that you know that what's being updated from all the other systems is going to be there. It's going to be current. And then if you run your report and I run my report, we're pulling on the same data. So we should have consistency in numbers coming back.
So Josh, what does this mean from the process side? And we talk about truth and how do we define it and whose data wins over who. Walk us through what it means from that perspective.
And there's a few different challenges. AI is delivering on the promise of big data. And so, there's always things that you have to worry about as far as data prep, right? And data engineering and bringing the data forward. And it is, like Jeff had brought up, it's really important to understand whose data wins. But what I was really excited about with this enterprise truth also was just the ability to have the who does win, but then also be able to quickly index some of that data. And so that with sharing who actually won on some of the data, but then also quickly being able to index it, the indexing of data is actually a big challenge when you're trying to bring forth some of this data into AI. And so I don't know that that was necessarily the intent of, kind of the announcement, but it did seem like that was kind of like the underlying benefit of doing some of these investments.
Excellent. Well, thank you. The next thought I was having is around vector search. This whole idea of finding the needle in the haystack, I think keep bringing up. You know, it sounds a little bit like, oh yeah, it's a grand promise. We keep hearing about this. How close are they really to delivering on this?
Vector search, we all love how Google works, right? And how you can just find things, right? And you kind of marry these awesome AI agents, with search. And then with all of their databases, they started adding all of these vector indexing. And then out on Firebase and Firestore, adding some of this really cool vector searching to it. Man, it's just, they keep on adding these really cool components that makes app dev even easier. And so being able to, either for just search within a website or search within an agent or indexing data within an agent, I was really excited about this. I don't know how big it was as far as for other people, but for me, coming from a builder perspective, being able to have all these databases having these capabilities and being able to deliver those on the front end, it was really cool. So I was really excited about this one.
It'll be fascinating to see how much it lives up to the hype, right? And get into this. Can't wait to get our hands dirty with this
Me too.
capability for sure.
Definitely. Definitely.
Well, on the applications and infrastructure side, what was the thing that caught your eye the most?
I don't know for others, but I always like to be really structured around my data and making sure that we're bringing all the insights around an application, monitoring and so on. And so to me, App Hub was a really exciting one, just being able to, invest in that area and make sure that, App Hub was kind of taking care of our application portfolio and application insights. And so that was a big announcement for me. I don't know, Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that one was pretty cool. I like the BigQuery continuous queries. I think there's just so much potential around automation when you're able to do continuous queries, and maybe even things as far as getting alerted when there's changes to data, so you're constantly able to check your data and see if there's updates or things happening, and then trigger immediate workflows based on that. So I think there's a lot with the BigQuery continuous queries. The other one that I really liked was the confidential VMs. Getting deeper data security was just something to me that it's needed within the environments, and so I think that it's something that's going to be really huge going forward.
Another exciting one too was we saw just recently some of the NVIDIA announcements come out, right? And some of their exciting new GPU chips and so on. I really liked how Google is trying to integrate that natively into some of their compute components. And so a lot of those little things I'm looking forward to seeing and being able to leverage, as far as like we talked about earlier, model inference, which is kind of like the response times, but just all these little lightweight components that we can leverage through the Google platform, and being able to pull that through and use these new awesome GPUs. And so that was another area that I was really excited about.
Excellent. Well, guys, that was really insightful about all the changes that we were able to identify here in Google Next. I think we covered some of the highlighted ones. There's obviously more that was there. I mean, Gemini AI, we had Vertex AI talking about the AI capabilities from the buzzword into something that we can actually use. The data never sleeps components. Google's tackling all those challenges head on with enterprise truth. And there's plenty of others that came up. Thanks a lot for your insights, Josh and Jeff. Appreciate you taking the time out today, and looking forward to doing this again soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.